Alright, Unknown here and back with another video. Today we're going to be going over Fractured Online and a more in-depth view on trying to figure out and work a build into early game, mid game, and late game. So the biggest thing for you to do when trying to figure out what build you're going to be playing is to figure out what you want to do in game and start with like a broader sense. Okay, I want to be a mage. I don't know what kind of mage. I know I typically play mages in this game. I want to be a mage, or I want to be a tank. I want to be a melee brawler, and figure out kind of what your general class type is going to be at in game. Once you figure that out, so let's say we decide at in game we're going to be a melee brawler kind of slash assassin. So if that's the build we're going to be going on, I want to point out quite a few things of you planning your build because there are restrictions in the game that the game doesn't make apparent without you doing a lot of reading and paying attention to detail, and it also doesn't tell you a lot of things in the tooltips that it should tell you. So there's going to be really four focal points in creating your build. So the four focal points, the first focal point that you're going to do and plan out is going to be your skills and abilities. So when you're going through here, because the game shows you all of the available, 200 or so skills in the game, and you'll be able to see their damage type, what they base their damage off of, their cast time, their mana cost. There's a couple things that you need to pay attention to when you are figuring out your build. So let's take, for instance, that we were going to do kind of that melee brawler rogue type build, right? Because I'm going to show you kind of the way to mix and match things that will help you. Obviously, being focused on just one or two trees is probably best. Just kind of depending on what you're going for. So, like if you're going for a mage, going like full out fire is going to be stronger when fire is strong than going like a mixture between fire and frost, right? Going full out frost is going to be stronger than a hybrid when frost is strong. And what I mean by that is if you're going up against an enemy or another guild or whatever, and you're pure fire, you're going to do a ton of damage unless that other team knows this and they're building around fire damage protection between their armors, their enchantments and imbuements, their skills and talents. All they have to do is go farm this skill right here, Cloak of Flames, summon a barrier of flames around you, which increases your fire resistance and damages nearby opponents. So they're going to get an extra 200, 300, 400 fire resistance just off this one spell that they can turn on. Same thing with poison. There are potions in the game that literally just get rid of the poison stacks. So if you're pure poison, you're going to do a ton of poison damage, but if they negate that poison damage with some kind of dispel or whatever, then your damage is going to fall off. So that's the plus of going something hybrid. So if you went Frostfire, it is what it is. So going back to our build, so the first things we want to do is kind of figure out like build defining mechanics, right? So just take for instance the rogue slash melee brawler build we were talking about in the beginning. So obviously if we're going to go rogue abilities, we're going to have to let's turn on the rogue abilities, right? So assassination, all right, these are a bunch of rogue type abilities. This entire school requires you to be in light armor and have a one-handed weapon. It doesn't have to be a dagger. It can be a one-handed sword, a rapier, a one-handed axe, a club, right? But you have to be in light armor. So swapping your armor out mid-fight isn't going to work. And you have to have a one-handed weapon. and then knife fighting. So all of the knife fighting skills are going to require you to be holding a knife. They don't require you to wear light armor. So you could do knife fighting, dagger fighting, and all these abilities in heavy armor if you wanted. And then, um, since we're going with kind of that not just straight up assassin rogue type class, we're going with more of like a melee brawler type rogue class. Um, the axe fighting stuff has bleeds. Almost all, not all of them, but almost all of these, or quite a few of these, are have a pretty good bleed stack on their abilities. And then mix that with out of the warfare tree bloodlust, which every time you hit an opponent that's bleeding, you recover some health. You also do extra damage to that opponent. So, kind of what we would be looking at in our build would be the warfare tree, assassination tree, knife fighting tree, and axe tree. Right. So you'll be able to fill either 6, 7, or 8 abilities on your 8 ability bar off of these skills. Right. So that's 4, 8, 10. It's 33 skills that you'll be able to choose from, because that's the kind of build that you're going for. There's other things too. I mean, you could look into the hunter tree, and you could look into the leadership tree, because most of this stuff doesn't require you to have specific gear and stuff on. Some probably does, like this one here, shields up, right? It requires you to hold a shield. So if your build's not going to hold a shield, then you're not going to be able to use this. But this would be the maximum amount of skills that you're really looking at. This is 47 different skills. So you need to come up with the skills that you want, your top 8 skills, 6 to 8, depending on the memory cost, to figure out what your kind of in-game build rotation is going to be within your hotbar. So figure that out first, kind of what your general build is going to be, and then start getting into the nuances. So in our build that we're theory crafting right now on camera, I know that we're going to go kind of like that rogue assassin, but also cause bleed damage, so that way we can have some sustain with bloodlust, where every time we hit them, we're going to gain a portion of life back. But we need bloodlust requires your opponent to be bleeding. And if we take a look at the knife fighting skills, bleeding strike is the only one in here that makes your opponent bleed. And relying on just bleeding strike to keep your opponents bleeding might be good, might not for your build. Depends, right? So what else can we do to cause bleeding? Axes. Most of their stuff, like sharp strike, um, lacerate, causes stacks of bleeding. These will actually give your opponents a lot of stacks. Stacks of bleeding for lacerate is 1.8 times your strength. So you're probably putting on 40 or 50, almost 50 stacks of bleeding on your opponent with this one skill with a 10-second cooldown. But here's the problem, right? The tooltips don't tell you this, but knife fighting, sword fighting, fencing, mace fighting, axe fighting, archery, they actually require, this entire school requires you to use that weapon. So knife fighting, all of these skills, you have to be currently holding a weapon in your hand to use any of the knife fighting stuff. Same thing with the axes in our theory crafting build. You have to be holding an axe in your hand. The great thing about this game, and that kind of blows over and you don't kind of realize it at first, is let me grab a couple things here. Open up our inventory and character menu. And what we're going to do is we're going to put extra weapons on our weapons bar down here. The game doesn't do very good job telling you that you actually have this. You open this up and it's clear as day once you realize it. You're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, but press tab to cycle through weapons. So, you can see I have a dagger in my hand here. If I press tab, I switch to the hammer. If I press tab, I switch to the axe. So if you notice down here on my ability bar, with a dagger in my hand, I can cast all my abilities. But if I swap over to hammer, oh look at that, strike wounds is grayed out. I can't use it. I swap over to my axe. Oh look, now I can't use fireball or relocate. Whereas with the hammer, I can use both of those, just not strike wounds. So this is a way for you to be able to mix and match schools that typically wouldn't work together, so that you could have two or three abilities while holding your dagger, and then hit tab, swap over to your axe to use lacerate to make them bleed and add those bleed stacks, and then back over to your dagger to do your other stuff. So you could just tab Q and W, tab E and R, tab Q and W, tab E and R, and you would be able to use different schools by doing that. What's really hard to do, and which isn't going to work out for you, is the armor. So if you have abilities that require you to wear or not wear a certain armor, swapping your armor isn't as easy and as quick as just pressing tab to swap your weapons. To swap your armor around, you actually have to equip a new piece of armor. So that means grabbing it in mid-fight, trying to grab it out of your inventory to stick it on, or right-click it, right? So I can right-click something in my inventory to pop it on. But if you're going to be running around in mostly light armor and one piece of medium armor for no reason, that's going to end up blocking a lot of your abilities out. So that's step one, is figuring out what your main ability, or your main step one is figuring out what your main in-game class is going to be. Are you going to be a rogue type character that causes bleeding and uses bloodlust to heal yourself? Are you going to be, an archer, type, but also do spell casting, because guided shot is pretty dang good damage, but it's based on intelligence rather than perception like all the other bow abilities, which I think is silly. Please, the developers really should just swap this back over to perception or dexterity, not just base it on intelligence, because this is the only archer skill based on intelligence, which is really dumb. But are you going to be an archer that also runs a lot of intelligence so that you can get some venomancy, poison skills, so you can be like a poison archer? So those are the kind of things you need to look at. If you're going to do that, you got to, you have a main class and then kind of like a built-in subclass. You need to look at your subclass, right? Because if your main class requires you to use bows, and then your subclass requires you to use something else, if we take a look at like the venomancy stuff, you could be in light or medium armor, and you got to have a spell channeling weapon. That's going to be for all of these, right? So you're not going to be able to be a axe wielder in heavy plate and then also add poison on top of it, because the armor restriction requires you to have light or medium armor, not heavy plate. So that's the main thing, is to look at the restrictions and figure it out. The other main thing that you need to look at when figuring out your ability build, if we look at our presets, this isn't super apparent either until you try to do it and mess it up and you're like, oh crap. But you have memory slots here, right? You're capped at 15. Everybody's capped at 15 memory slots. You see my skills are 15 out of 15. If you add up this little number here, and you see in the tooltip at the top right, it says tier 2. This one says tier 3. So that's what that 2 and 3 means. This poison is a tier 1 ability. Tier 1 will take up 1 memory slot. So you could theoretically have 15 tier 1 skills on your, saved into your ability preset. You can only have 8 on your bar, but you can have 15 saved and swap them out or whatever. Same thing with 2. It takes up 2 memory slots. 3 takes up 3 memory slots. So if you go find all the huge, like Fireball, huge 36 times your intelligence damage spells that are tier 3, and that's what you put on your bar, or that's what you put on your preset, you're only going to have 5 spells, right? You're going to have 5 out of your 8, um, 5 out of your 8 slots available taken up, and you've got 3 extra slots. So that'll leave you some room for some bandages. That'll leave you room for a health potion that removes poison, like this Arnica tea, and it'll leave you another slot. As of right now, I don't know what you would put in that other slot. Maybe like a different, like a mana potion, so you'd have a mana potion, a health potion that also removes poison and bandages. Maybe that's what you want to do, and then you just have your 5 uh, casting abilities that are all tier 3, and that's your full 15 memory. The other thing to look at when you're looking at this is if you put a bunch of tier 3 stuff on your bar, you can see like Fireball, which is a huge damage spell, 36 times your intelligence is quite large. The cooldown on this is 20 seconds. 20 seconds is a long time in a fight in this game, even one-on-one, right? But you're going to be mostly fighting with your guild or your friends, 5 versus 5 or 10 versus 10 or guild the city sieges. 20 seconds is a long time to be waiting on your skills. So most of these, second wind is a fantastic heal. Gives you, roughly 40 to 50% of your life total back in one instant cast skill. But it has a 60-second cooldown. In a fight, you're only getting one of these off. See what else we got for this. Okay, so here's Coup de Grace, 20-second cooldown. Lightning Strike, 16-second cooldown, right? Let's oppose that to, a tier 1 skill, Firebolt. It only does 200 damage rather than 650, but it's a 5-second cooldown. I can cast 4 Firebolts, which is 800 and something damage, as opposed to, in the same cooldown time, 1 Fireball that does 650 to 750 damage. So that's the next best thing to look at. Is going to be what skills are you looking at putting in your in-game build, and how many memory cost slots is it going to take? Because you can only use 15 maximum. So after you've figured out kind of your build that you want to go, do you want to go pure swords, right? Do you want to go pure hammers? Do you want to go a hybrid, like we talked about, knife and axe? Do you want to go sword and axe? Do you want to go bows and ice, right? Once you figured out kind of your build, go through the skills and figure out, okay, what's the best skills of the playstyle and the class that I kind of want to build, and will those fit within the 15 memory slots? You're going to need a mixture of tier 2, tier 3, tier 1. So after that, kind of the next thing that you're going to want to look at is going to be your weapons and armor types. Because you're already going to know by looking and planning out your abilities that, hey, I've got 2 or 3 mage spells on here. I've got fireball and I've got poison. I can't wear heavy armor. So that just takes all heavy armor out for your build. So if we go into the little book of knowledge area and go to armor, this tree for plate armor, slayer, and knight armor, this whole tree is out for you if you're going to be if you're going to make that build. If you're going to make an archer build that also casts spells, you're not going to wear this, because almost all those spells are going to require you to wear light or medium armor. Same thing with like if you're going for like a pure rogue assassin type build. Almost all the assassination tree and stuff like that, it requires you to wear light armor. This is the only light armor tree. So you got the basic primitive ones, and then you have scholar clothes, which is more geared towards mages, and then assassin clothes, which is geared towards like your assassin type rogue type class. Kind of everything in the middle is going to be these three trees, right? The chainmail tree, the leather tree, and the hide tree. These are all medium armor, right? Medium. If you're going to be, battle mage armor, if you're going for like that melee mage or whatever it is, um, you might go with this because it is medium armor. Um, but what's cool about this outer tree, all of these, they give you a full set bonus. So mixing and matching isn't going to do anything for you, except for that'll let you kind of customize. If you look at some of the pieces, it says physical armor 100, and then it has extra 40 defense for slashing and piercing damage, and then magical armor 80, and an extra 240 against energy damage. So mixing and matching these on the outer will help you will allow you to customize your physical armor and what you're defensive against, but at the behest of being able to use a full set bonus. And some of these are really powerful. How game defining and meta powerful is yet to be known because there hasn't been a lot of sieges or like huge PvP wars or anything yet because the game's only been out for a week and a half or so. But um, but some of these are really good for certain builds, so you might want to take a look at that. So pay attention to your abilities, and when it says armor restrictions, pay attention to what type of armor you must be wearing. The other thing to look at is going to be the weapons. So when we take a look at the abilities and all the what they call the schools, right? So ability school proficiencies. So the schools of fencing, the school of mace fighting, axe fighting, archery, cryomancy, etc. When we take a look at the abilities within that school, I kind of want to take this right part, right at the knife fighting, all the way over to archery. I want to take these into account because these are kind of separated from the rest of this in the fact of the tooltip doesn't tell you, and they really should add this, but the knife fighting abilities require you to be holding a knife to cast them. The sword abilities require you to be holding a sword to cast these abilities. The fencing abilities require you to be holding a spear or a rapier, and so on. The archery abilities require you to be carrying and holding a bow to cast these spells. The tooltip doesn't even tell you that. Whereas the difference is in like let's say the assassination tree, you just have to, if you look at weapon restriction, one-handed. It doesn't require you to be holding a dagger or a knife. It requires you to have a one-handed weapon, so a one-handed sword, a one-handed fencing weapon, a one-handed hammer to cast these abilities. So make sure you're looking at the abilities as a whole, the weapon restrictions and armor restrictions on those abilities. Plan your armor based on your abilities, and then plan your weapons based on the abilities. And the reason why I put the weapons last is because you are able to swap. So, just putting if you're gonna have bow abilities and you're holding a bow in your first slot, but then you're also gonna have dagger abilities, then put a dagger on your second slot, and then let's say the bow abilities is your burst damage. That's what you're using for burst damage. You're gonna pop up. You're gonna use your bow abilities, and then your dagger abilities are going to be for other purposes. Then press tab, swap over to your dagger, pop your dagger abilities. Maybe it's right? So you turn invisible, you run and hide behind a tree, pop back into your bow abilities, come back out, QWE, your burst damage again. You can do those kind of combos. the biggest restriction that I have found is going to be the armor. So you're going to have to wear, really, it's like one type of armor, especially if you want the set bonuses. So keep in mind your cooldowns. Keep in mind your mana. You go fill up a whole bunch of tier 3 abilities that cost 720 mana to cast, and you only have 1700 mana. You're casting 2 abilities, and you're hoping to regen to cast your third. In the middle of a fight, like I said, I mean, fights in this game only last 30 seconds to a minute and a half. If it's one on one, most of the time, I mean, you just don't have the time to cast 2 huge spells and then wait on regen, you know, um, to be able to cast a third. Or even if you have mana potions on you, you hit your mana potion, you cast your third ability, but then you're out of mana again. And now you're waiting on regen or for the mana potion cooldown. And um, so plan accordingly. Have something to do. Have something on your ability bar to do at all times. It's kind of a tip. So yeah, so that's really the kind of in-depth portion of figuring out a build, right? Um, so just to recap, you're going to take a look at your abilities, open up a Word document, write down the abilities, write down at the bottom of the ability tooltip, write down where you can get them. So Fireball you can get from those 4 things: Fire Shamans, Fire Elementals, Ember Dragons, and Ember Dragonlings. Write down what stat the damage or the protection or whatever it is based on. So with Fireball, it's 36 times your intelligence, and kind of go through and find abilities that are going to work with your build and what you want to play to have the most fun. I mean, there's some stuff in here like the leadership tree. Um, Most of this stuff doesn't have any restrictions, right? Um, I mean, Shields Up does, because it's a shield ability, so you're required to be holding a shield. But most of this stuff doesn't have any. Intimidate doesn't have any restrictions whatsoever. Anybody can use a spell. And then make sure you write down the armor restriction and the weapon restriction. The same thing with the warfare tree. Almost all of this stuff, other than stuff like Shield Slam, because it's Shield Slam, the rest of this stuff, there's no restrictions. Um, you know, Ram Through also requires a shield, and that's probably the only two. It is. So other than Shield Slam and Ram Through, all the rest of these abilities have no restrictions. Um, but Leadership and Warfare Tree have stuff everybody can use. So that's kind of my in-depth guide to figuring out a build, trying to figure out where my in-game build is going to end up, how to get there. Um, so the big thing is kind of key parts. You're going to start off with your core 6 talents, your core 6 abilities, and you're going to pick up a few along the way. And then, so kind of figure out like, okay, I'm going to start with these abilities. My first 2 abilities to make my character progress faster. Let's just say you were going full out Fire Mage. I can tell you now, obviously, Fire Totem is one of the best things you can pick up for a Fire Mage. But that's kind of towards the end. Fireball is amazing. Fireball is a lot of AoE damage. You can pull 3 or 4 mobs to you. Um, Stun them with Burning Pillar, shoot a fireball at the group, and they're all almost dead, if not dead. So figure out your build of, these are my starter abilities. These are the next 3 abilities I'm going to grab. Here's my end game goal, my end game build. At that point, you're starting to work on your harder abilities to get your armor. Which armor set you're going to use, so that you can do different bonuses, right? Um, and then imbuements. Imbuing, you can see like when you hover over these imbued properties, you have 0 of 2. So you have two imbue slots that you can put on your weapons to add different effects to your weapon, to all your armor and everything. It's the same thing with armor. You have imbued property slots, and then really the last thing from there is going to be your talents. Um, your talent tree, it doesn't really matter because these points you can at any time sitting next to a fire you can change these, so you're not spending them for good when you use them. But figuring out the talents that work best for you, there's a lot of like specialized things like this skill here, single weapon style, while wielding a single one-handed weapon, melee weapon, keeping your offhand free, which means you can't put a shield on. You gain 50 bonus evasion, and your basic attacks do 6% extra damage. So, and that's any one-handed melee weapon. It doesn't have to be a dagger, right? It shows a dagger in the tooltip, but it could be a one-handed sword. It could be a club. So you're going to do 6% extra damage while actually, I'm sorry, it's 6% per point, and there's 4 points. So you can see here 24% extra damage. That's a large damage increase. Um, but there's some ones over here like with two-handed. So attacks performed with two-handed melee weapons deal uh, are dealt with 50 bonus accuracy and deal 4% extra damage. And that's 4% per point. So you're going to do 16% extra damage while swinging with a two-hander. So take a look at all these, kind of figure out the talents that work with your build, but just know that with the talents, you don't have to, you're not locking yourself into anything, and you can change them as needed. I change them all the time. You can have different presets. So once you get done with that, the other part of the last part, and this is kind of end game, is going for the orbs to make your build more powerful. Um, this isn't very good at explaining what this does, but once you reach a high enough level or rank, your KP rank, these will start unlocking. They'll all unlock at the same time. Like the first slot will unlock for all of them, and then the second slot will unlock for all of them. Once they unlock, you can use the orb of proficiencies to get these up from level 0 to level 10. It only costs like one orb to get the first three levels. So one orb for level 1, one orb for level 2, one orb for level 3, and then after that, it gets progressively more orbs required to level this up. But go for those orbs. You know, check the auction houses in each city to see if you can pick some up. I think right now most of them are going for anywhere between 7 and 12,000 gold. So if you see one that will help you progress, that's 4,000 or 5,000, pick it up or less. You know, um, obviously some of the more powerful or the more popular classes, those orbs are going to be more expensive. I can show you what they look like actually. So this is what it looks like. So here's an orb of geomancy. Here's an orb of assassination. So if I'm building a rogue, um, this will, it says here, it permanently increases your proficiency in a specific combat related skill. You can increase your proficiency through skills and abilities menu. So, you know, here. So if I have that orb of assassination, and you know, if I have that on me, and then I go to assassination tree and level this up, it'll spin the orb. See, it says you will consume one orb to increase the proficiency. And then what that does is it makes every single skill in the assassination tree more powerful. And you can view those orbs up to rank 10 in this school, and they'll be that much more powerful. So that's end game. Those orbs are RNG dropped. So that's it for this guide. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I really appreciate the support I've gotten on my last 3 videos. I've gotten a lot of comments thanking me for making those kind of beginner guides. So subscribe, like it, It really helps. I actually went back and looked at the analytics of the first three videos, and the traffic, a lot of the traffic, like 35 or 40%, was like my videos were recommended to to you guys. And the way that works, obviously, with the algorithm is the more the video gets liked and the more the video gets watched, it'll actually recommend those videos to other people looking for fractured online stuff. So I definitely appreciate it. See y'all next time.